In this video, we're going to build a very simple application using the Django web framework, and we're going to do this by following a test-driven approach. Now, test-driven development allows us to put together an application by understanding our requirements first, then writing our tests, and these tests basically dictate how we write the actual code, because the code that we write is actually to make the tests pass. So in this video, we're going to be following the different ways to test a Django application, and we're going to use these tests to help us build our simple application. So without further ado, let us get started with building this basic project. So right here in my VS Code, the first thing I'm going to do is to create a virtual environment that's going to help us to keep our dependencies independent of our system dependencies, and this is going to allow us to install our Python packages without having to conflict with our system. So I'm going to go in my terminal right here. I've opened up this very blank folder. I called it TDD Django, and then I placed it within VS Code. So the way you can do that is by basically going to File and then Open Folder, and then you open up whatever folder you want. So in my case, it's TDD Django, so we're just going to continue with this. Now I'll create a virtual environment with Python. In this case, it's going to be Python -m, and then I'll call venv, which is basically virtual env, and then I'll call env, which is going to be the name of our virtual environment. So when I press enter, a virtual environment folder has been created right here. So we shall go ahead and first activate it and then install our project dependencies as required by our project. Now that our virtual environment has been installed, let's go ahead and activate it. So to do that, I'll just call source. In this case, I'm going to say env and then /script. So this is going to be scripts on Windows, but you'll have been on Linux. So I'll just say source env scripts activate, and now we are inside our virtual environment. So once we've installed and activated our virtual environment, let's go ahead and install Django with pip install, and then we shall say Django. So this will go ahead and install Django within our virtual environment. Now that our Django has been installed, let's go ahead and try to create a simple project. But before we create our project, let's first verify the version of Django that we've been installed. So what I'm going to do is to call our Python. So this is going to open up our interactive shell. Now I'll say Python, and then I'll come and say import Django. And what this will do is to import our Django that we've installed. So we can find out the version of Django we've installed by saying django.get_version, and this will return the version of Django that we've installed. Now we've installed the latest version of Django, which is Django 4.1.3. Alright, now that we've done this, let's go ahead and create our Django project. So in this video, I'm going to be creating a very simple blog application, and we're going to be using a test-driven approach. So what I'm going to do is to press Ctrl+Z to get out of this, and then we shall begin by creating our Django project. So once we've installed Django within our virtual environment, we expect to have the Django admin command, and what this does is to allow us to create a fresh Django project. It can also allow us to run some of the things that we may run with Python manage.py. So what I'm going to do is to say Django project, or Django, it's actually Django admin, then I'll say start project, and then I'll call this project my blog, and then I'll specify that we need this project to be created within our current directory, so that we have our main.py at the root of our folder. So to do that, I'll just say space dot, and this will go ahead and basically create our project within this virtual environment or folder, or our project folder. Now that our project has been created, let's go ahead and try to run our migration. So to do that, I'll just come and say Python and then money.py, and then in this case we're just basically going to run migrate. So I'll just come and run all our database migrations that come with Django. So this will go ahead and run all our database migrations. So once these database migrations have run, the next thing is going to be for us to be able to create our super user. So I'm just going to come right here and say Python and then money.py create super user. So this is the user who is going to be able to access our admin dashboard or our admin site. So once I press enter, we're going to be asked for the different credentials for this user. So it seems like I've made a mistake. I'm going to retype this as super user and then to basically ask us for the various fields. So the first one is going to be our username. So I'm just going to call this admin. Then the email address is going to be admin@app.com. And then we shall have a password. So I'm going to type in a simple password right here and another simple password right here. And basically our super user has been created. Now the first thing we're going to do is to run our server to basically confirm if our Django installation was successful and our test or our admin dashboard is actually working. So to do that, I'll just come and say Python and then money.py and then I'll say run server. So once this is done, our server is going to run and it's going to run at localhost 8000. So let's go ahead and try to open up our browser. So I'll just control and click on this link. And this is going to open up our Chrome. So it's going to open up our browser and this will show us that our installation of Django was successful. Now if we want to confirm whether our admin is working well, we are basically going to go right here and say /admin, and then we are going to go to our admin site just like you see here. So we're going to try to log into this admin site. So we're going to provide our username and we're also going to provide our password that we used while creating this user with the create super user command. Now I'll go ahead and log in into our Django admin site and our admin site is working. We've now basically set up our application. So the first thing we can do is to go ahead and create a simple basic app that we can be able to use to help us to manage our blog posts. So the way we're going to do that is by coming right within our project in our VS Code. So I'm going to open up a new terminal, and right after opening this new terminal, still I'll enter our virtual environment. So I have to activate it with source env scripts and activate. So once I'm in there, then the next thing is actually going to be to create an application. So just like many of you know, Django allows us to separate the functionality of our applications in two apps, and these apps can also be shipped from one project to another, and the functionality will always be working the same. So let us go ahead and create our app. So to do that, I'll just say Python money.py and then I'll say start app, and then here we're going to create our blog post. So I'm just simply going to call this posts and then I press enter. So this will basically go ahead and create the posts folder right here. Now this post folder is going to be our application, and once we've created this, then the next thing is going to be to register it within our main project. So that is actually done within the project level settings.py file, which is basically the one that contains all the settings that we have for all our apps. So I'm just going to come and remove this, and then we have to look into here. There are lots of settings right in here, but the most important one for now is going to be our install apps list. Now we're going to go ahead and basically copy the configuration class of this posts app. So that's found within our posts.apps. So we're going to copy this class, which is called a posts config class. And once we've done that, now I'm going to head over to our settings.py, and then I'll basically refer to that specific file. So it's going to be our, so I'm just going to come right here, and all I have to do is to say that it's going to be located within our posts app, and then we shall basically locate it within our ops module or our apps.py file, and then I'll also paste in the name of that class. So we have been able to register this class. So once we've been able to do that, now let's go ahead and try to write tests that are actually going to be able to help us to have a model created. So just like we know, Django operates on what we call the MVT architecture, which basically groups our app into models, views, and templates. Models allow us to be able to model the way we structure our data into classes that can also help us to access our database. So let us go ahead and try to create some tests that are going to help us to verify if our model exists. So to do that, right here we have our app that we call our post app, and it has quite a lot of things right in here. But the most important file right here is going to be our test.py, because that's where we're going to write our unit tests. So when you open up our test.py, we see that we are to write our test within that specific file. Now the way we write these tests is by subclassing what we call the test case class that is imported from Django.test. Now the beauty about Django is it helps us to write our tests using a framework that's inbuilt into it. So what you're going to do is to create our class that's going to allow us to make tests specific to models. So how I'm going to do that is by coming right here, and then I'll create a class, and then this class is going to be the one for testing our model. So Django follows a way of testing. So for example, if we are to test something, we have to name our file tests or test something.py, and then when also writing these classes, you also have to specify what you're going to test first. So for example, in this case, you'll say class, and then you'll say model, or let's say it's going to be post model test. So you have to write whatever you have to write, and then you write test, and that also has to subclass the test case class. Now once we've done that, now we have to also define a method or a test case, and this also has to follow a certain convention. So we have to say def, and then we say test, and then we write whatever we want to test. So in this case, it's going to be test post model exists. So in this case, we're going to say test post model exists, and then this is going to be inheriting from self. So what you're going to actually basically what we're going to do in this case is to basically check if our model exists by basically carrying out a very simple query onto this model, and then going ahead to implement this model after this test failing. So the way we're going to do that is by basically coming right here, and then we can say that our posts is going to be equal to, so we're going to create our post class and say post, in this case we're going to say with objects dot all. And once you've done that, then you can simply come and say that we want to assert if this actually exists. So we can just basically come and use the assert keyword. Now we're using the self or the current object that we get from the test case class. We can be able to access the different assertion methods. So for example, you can say self.assert, and then you can say assert equal, and in this case we can basically pass in the first argument, or what's first, what's on the left side, and then compare it to what is on the right to basically see if these things match. Now in this case, we're going to actually say if the posts is going to be equal to an empty list or an empty query set, then that means our test is going to pass. So when we do this, I'm going to save, and the way we run our test is by basically coming down in our terminal and running python manage.py, and then when we run tests, what this will do is to go ahead and basically instruct the test runner to look for tests within our test.py files in our entire project, and then run them to basically show us what's wrong or what's right when our tests pass. So when you check our result here, we actually have that we found one tests, and basically it also goes ahead and creates a test database to help us to basically do our test stuff. So every time we test with Django, we don't need to set up a test database. It does this in the background, something that is really good about Django. So what we've done is to basically test, and now we have an error. So we have an error, and that error is being got from the method test post model exists. So right here we see that we don't have the name post is non-defined. That means that our database model for our posts has not yet been created. So let's go ahead and create our post model. So to do that, we shall go ahead within our models.py file that's within our posts app. We're going to go ahead and create our model class. So to be able to create this model class, I'm just going to come right here and create it. So let me first model it out. So we're going to have our class of post, and this is going to have various fields. So we're going to have the ID, which is basically going to be generated for us by Django. We shall also have the title of that specific post, and we're also going to have the body, so basically things that belong to a post. And then we shall also have our, in this case we'll also have something like the date created. So we may say created at, so this will be created at, and we may also have updated or modified at. Let's just call it modified at. So basically these are the fields that we're going to have on our post class. Now we can also go ahead and define the data types that these have. For example, our ID can be an integer, our title can be let's say a varchar, or our body can also be text. Then our date created or our created at can be, let's say, a date time object. And then you can also have a date time object right here, so you can say date time. So once we have this, basically we can go ahead and try to create our post model. So when you do that, we can just come right here and then create our class by saying class, and this is going to be our class of post. Now this is going to inherit from models.model, and once we have this, then we are basically going to create our post, and this is going to inherit from models.model. Now let's go ahead and define the various fields. Now the ID that we have here is already defined for us by Django, so we don't need to define it again. We're going to start by defining the title. So the title, sorry for this, so our title is going to be equal to models dot char field. So we're going to have models.char field, and then we're going to describe the max length of this. So we're going to say max length, and let's say it's going to be 225 or 250. Let's just say the title is going to be, actually this is a title, so it should have a max length of let's say 50 characters. And once we have that, then we can also go ahead and define the body. So the body is going to be a text field, so we're going to say models.text field. And once we have this, then we can also go ahead and try to add the created at and the modified at date. So what we can do is to basically come here and say that we're going to have created at, and this is going to be models dot, this will be a date time object, so we shall use the date time field. And now right in here we can go ahead and specify that what we need is basically the auto now add attribute. And what this does is it keeps track of the time, of the specific time that you created that post object, and then stores it in our database. So I'm just going to come here and say auto now add, and this is going to be equal to true. So once you've done that, now we're also going to go ahead and basically add our modified at. So I'll just come and say modified at, and that will also be a models dot date time object or date time field, and this will also have auto now equals to true. And by doing this, what we're actually doing is to basically specify that this is going to be modified at a certain time. So auto now true is basically going to allow us to keep track of the time we update that specific post object. So once we've done that, let's go ahead and try to basically import our model and see if this is going to work. So before we import our model in our test, let's go ahead and basically run our migration. So I'll pull up our terminal and then run Python. So it's going to be Python money.py and then make migrations, because we have just created this model and then we need to create a migration file for it and migrate these changes to the database. So I'll just come and say Python money.py make migration. Let's actually make migrations, and that will basically go ahead and run our migration. So just like we see here, we've created a migration for our posts app and our model has been created. Now let's go ahead and write these changes within our database with Python money.py and then migrate. So this will go ahead and migrate our changes within our database. Now that this is done, let us go ahead and import our model within our tests. So I'm going to pull down this terminal and then go within our tests, and within our tests I'm going to begin by importing our model. So I'll just come and say from .models, we are actually going to go ahead and import our post model. And once we save that, now let's go ahead and try to basically get to run this test. So once we run this test, we're going to go ahead and I've actually run migrate, but the actual command is supposed to be test. So I'll just say Python money.py and then test. So I'll just say Python money.py test, and this will go ahead and run our tests. Now we see that we have our this is actually going to give us errors. So what we have here is our test is failing. This is because we are trying to compare a query set to basically a list. So what we can do is maybe to basically count the tests. So we can just maybe say post.objects. Let's say count, and basically equate it to 0. I hope this will pass because we don't have anything within this. So within this query set, so when we go ahead and run our tests, in this case we see that it's actually going to run because we don't actually have any post created within our database. So that has been the first test that we're going to run. Now we're going to continue writing our tests for our post model.